ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
Okay, I hope you've been having some fun here with me learning about Photoshop's selection tools. You know, I gotta say though, the real horsepower in Photoshop is when we start combining multiple commands, multiple tools together. So when you're learning Photoshop, you kind of have to learn about them kind of individually, but it's when you start working with them together, that's where things really start happening for you inside Photoshop. I'm going to give you a quick example of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to combine together one of my selection tools and also Photoshop's handy free transform. And let's see, I also want to move the object and duplicate them as well. So a bunch of things here that I want to do. So let's say, for example, I want to use this object here to my right. This, again, a bolt with a nut rusted onto the end of it. And I ask myself, all right, how am I going to select this object? I could go rectangular. I could go elliptical. We just learned about quick selection, so let's just make short work of this and move on to other things. Boom, there's my selection, right? Okay, good stuff. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap the V key on my keyboard to, of course, activate the Move tool inside my toolbox. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here as well, Control or Command minus on my keyboard. And even though the selection is kind of running off the edge of my screen there, he's still selected, no problems there. So long as I can see a little bit of him. What I can now do, as we know already, is tear this guy away. So we now have this floating selection inside Photoshop, something like this. Okay, and I'll zoom in a little bit on him so we can see him a little bit more closely. So he's floating, so I can move him around. I can stack him or layer him on top of other objects. And by the way, something that I neglected to mention during that exercise on the floating selections is in the next chapter, we're going to get into working with Photoshop layers, where you'll see how to stack objects and organize your images in a much more friendly, much more useful, organized way in any regard. Just wanted to mention that. So I have this floating selection. Now, what can I do with them? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to Photoshop's free transform command. We have seen this guy in action already. Do you remember the keyboard shortcut for the free transform? If you are thinking Control or Command T on your keyboard, you are absolutely correct. So go ahead and hit Control or Command T, or you can head to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform. I now have the Free Transform frame surrounding my marching ants, which of course enclose my selected object. So now what I can do is I can rotate this object around. I can, of course, continue to move him around inside my image. I can scale them or distort them. I don't want to distort them though, so I'm going to hold down my Shift key and drag from one of the corners to scale them larger or smaller, something like this. And I know that this is just kind of a quick down and dirty example, but I'm sure you get the idea here. Maybe in the real world, this could be maybe an automobile that I selected off of a background, or maybe a person or a sign or a piece of text, or who the heck knows, whatever you might have inside your images, right? As soon as I hit enter on my keyboard, that locks in the free transform, okay? However, don't forget, we still have marching ants, which means we still have a floating selection, which means we can still move this guy around on screen. And if we wanted to, we could still jump back to the free transform, Control or Command T on your keyboard, and continue to scale and position and adjust this guy, okay? As soon as I deselect, the story is over, okay? So as soon as we choose Control or Command D on our keyboard, or select and then deselect, the show's over, okay? Unless we decide to get into layers, and as promised, that's coming up next.